Welcome to SEC Football Live here on the 440 Sports Network. That is Stephen Godfrey. I am Braden Gall. You can get to me on the Twitter machine at Braden Gall. You can get to him at 38 Godfrey. SplitZoneDuo.com is the website as well. I know you got other things you're working on. We'll talk about that coming up. What a weekend, my guy. What a weekend.
Oh my gosh. You know what? We're gonna use this show to my professional benefit today. We're recording a little bit early, and so I have to make sense of that weekend.
Yep.
And I'm gonna be honest. We're gonna use the next hour to kind of walk through our feelings.
Yes, we will do that. We are not live, of course, today. Forced family vacation fall break at Nashville Metro schools are out. So I am currently on a lake or in a mountain somewhere near you. But very excited to talk about what took place last week. Look ahead to this week because I am taking the girls on what is now our sort of yearly sojourn to East Tennessee, to the Florida-Tennessee game with the spouse to continue the indoctrination process. They visited Neyland last year in their first ever visit to the stadium to beat Texas A&M. And it all ties in because we saw Josh Heupel evolve and change the way he called the game. I think in that game against Texas A&M, realizing in real time that Joe Milton was not going to be able to execute his offense. They leaned on the running game. They eventually won that game with special teams and defense. Sound familiar, Tennessee fans? It didn't exactly work against Arkansas. We'll get to that. Vanderbilt, greatest upset maybe in the history of the program. I know you had some weird stuff happen. I've reached out to some folks around the program as well, so we got lots of Vandy stuff to talk about, Alabama stuff to talk about for real. We also have Ole Miss bouncing back in a big way. A ton of stuff to get to. Texas A&M. I can't remember when a top 10 SEC team gets blown out uncompetitively, and it's an afterthought of a story on the day in which I think it's safe to say it's one of the craziest days in the history of the SEC, with two top 5 teams losing to unranked teams, which has never happened in the history of the conference. Then you have another top 10 team in Missouri losing. Then you have 3 other unranked teams in college football losing to top 10 teams losing to unranked teams. And that doesn't include Miami making the crazy comeback at like 1:30 a.m. Eastern time, which I was, much to my wife's chagrin, I was still awake watching.
Oh man, I was spent. I got back from Vandy, and as soon as I filed my story, I was out.
So a lot of stuff to do. And by the way, rate, review, subscribe, please. If you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up, notifications turned on, the whole deal. Podcast app, 5 stars only. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. And of course, if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, please share the product. We do appreciate you guys. We are, of course, brought to you by our wonderful and amazing friends, ML Rose, the neighborhood craft beer and burger joint in Nashville. They got 6 great locations. I was there this weekend, Godfrey. I was there with the kids, with the kiddos. Which
location?
We went to Charlotte because my youngest plays soccer games right there at Metro Center, Ted Rhodes, right there. And we got done about 10 a.m., 10:15 or so. Got over there for, she played hard. She scored a couple goals. They had a tie 3-3 match, and she's 6 playing up on the 9U team.
Nice.
And, yeah. Scully's baby, Title IX. Let's go. And and
I think about that too.
My oldest is a softball player, also looking at Title IX there.
Get it.
Yep. But so we go, and I was like, look, we got a chicken biscuit with that spicy honey drizzle. We got the crunch wrap, the breakfast crunch wrap, which is fantastic and delicious. The kids got their burgers. 2 for 1. I got a Bloody Mary. Wife got a beer. We watched the Texas A&M game and the Missouri game. It was nice. It was wonderful until the game was boring, which happened quickly.
Yeah, it kind of did. Was that the... Okay.
MO Rose, everybody. Go to MO Rose.
I know the answer to this, but it's like that A&M Missouri upset was like the sleepiest upset. And it's really because of what happened the rest of the day.
Is that because the guy's nickname is Blanket? Is that what you're doing?
I guess. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I'll definitely take credit for it. No, I think just by virtue of the fact, like, that was an 11 a.m. kick. I think a lot of us had doubts about Missouri as a top 10 or top 5 team. But then I really just think it was like so many other things started happening on that day that it was like,
the other.
Dude, Sunday afternoon, I was like, oh yeah, Missouri lost.
Yeah. So you're the one who broke into the Missouri hotel is what you're telling us.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So before we get to any of the games and the specifics, go to MO Rose, everybody. Great happy hours on Saturday and Sunday morning as you're watching football games, as I've just explained to you all. So I want to ask you this for like a broad question about the playoff in general, because I think ultimately, if you are supporting expansion over the last few years,
okay,
I think the vision of what you wanted, or at least what we were talking about, at least this is what I said, at least, which is we want more games to matter more for longer. We want more teams to be involved in this chase for a playoff spot for longer. We want games like Kentucky and Tennessee to be valuable at the end of the season. We want strange teams, Iowa State, and these teams to be in these meaningful games for longer. And in a perfect world, you have a group of 5 team that is good enough to play with a top 5 team, which they did, Boise State against Oregon early in the year. And then you have all this chaos happen, and it brings like even more teams back into the fold, with Alabama losing and Tennessee losing and Missouri losing just in the SEC, not to mention the rest of college football, USC, Michigan, almost Miami. Is this not what we wanted out of the playoff, was to have 6 or 7 or 8 teams in the SEC that all think that they got a chance, but really it's only 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. And at the end of the day, they're going to host, a couple of them might host home playoff games. Isn't this what we were sold when people said this is and I'm those people, for the record, that this is what expansion will do for us as a sport?
There's a lot of big feelings this week, so I just want to acknowledge that up front. Everybody wants to take a macro, sort of like 10,000 foot view of the impact of this, and I'm doing the same thing. You're doing the same. Like I don't know if we know yet. Going into last weekend, there was a little bit of a talking point that everything's fine with the 12-team playoff. It's a good year for it. But man, when you get to that second round, we're going to see some blowouts. That was kind of like that kicked around a couple different shows I do. I don't think we ever addressed it here specifically. The idea was there's going to be a separation of killers, of just absolute, like Alabama was a killer. Ohio State, maybe Miami before 2 weeks ago, right? We started thinking like there's going to be these dominant seeds, or you're going to have like a 5-seed conference title loser from the Big Ten of the SEC rip through the bracket. No one is saying that now, because I don't know if anyone right now in the second week of October is confident that there are 1, 2, 3, certainly not 4 programs that are that much more dominant than the field beneath them, all the way to the 10 teams that will be left out, right? So The field is equal, more or less. I'm not trying to argue right now about like an Ohio State or a Texas or whatever. Like, it's just give it time. Also, like Red River's coming up, so let's hold that thought.
By the way, Texas a 14-point favorite in that game. That's the biggest number I can remember, I feel like.
Does that feel good for anybody? I know that doesn't feel good for Texas, because I've been to many a Red River that it didn't work.
When I say read a history book, I really mean pull up the Wikipedia page.
Oh, here, shout out to my buddy Mike Gray. This is right near my desk. This just came out. The guys from Dave Campbell, the Guide to Texas College Football. It's great. Nice. Like, super easy holiday present for somebody.
There you go. No free shouts.
Just gave one. Sorry. That Dave Campbell, I'm telling you, that magazine is
it's good. It's good.
It's really good. It's really good. It's all SEC now too, at the top. I don't know is the short answer to your question, because we've had crazy years where we didn't have a 12-team format waiting at the end. The difference is, and we're going to talk about LSU Ole Miss this weekend. I am tempted to say that a game like LSU Ole Miss now is probably an elimination game, right? We think,
right. Like that was my theory with Missouri A&M last week.
Okay,
but
it can't be, because I don't know if we're gonna get. Are there going to be undefeated teams in the playoff?
No. But I think this is what made this weekend so important to the conversation, which is that every time, because Oregon, Ohio State's coming up. SEC fans normally maybe not checking in on that game. Yeah, maybe SEC fan does check in on that game. But now you have to. Now you have to, because if you're a Tennessee fan with a loss, an Alabama fan with a loss, a Georgia fan with a loss, Ole Miss with a loss, Missouri with a loss. Every one of these teams we thought were in the mix for either the SEC championship or clearly a playoff spot. A&M only one loss. Shh, don't tell anybody. What I find interesting is that because they're all one-loss teams, Michigan 2 losses, USC a loss, they are going to continue to losses are going to pile up across the country. And it's going to, what happens is they're all coming back to the pack. And as long as your team can just kind of stay above that 2-loss threshold, you can play your way back into to contention. And not everybody's going to be able to do it. And I find this is what's great about the playoff is that all these teams losing brings Ole Miss and Missouri back squarely into the conversation.
So what you're saying, and I'm not trying to poke holes because I agree with exactly what you're saying, but like what you're saying is 3-2 South Carolina's alive.
Yeah, but isn't that good?
I mean, it's fantastic. It's just we are breathing a different kind of air as a collective right now.
Isn't this what we wanted? Is my question.
Here's what the sport wanted, and I'm fine with it because I think the more you diversify your viewing experience, the better the fan you are. You talked about like, all right, the SEC fan should really lock in on a game like Oregon and Ohio State. I'm going to be honest with you. You don't have to this week because neither team is going to leave the situation eliminated. However, let's just say for the sake of conversation, it's in Eugene. Ohio State's a higher rated team. It doesn't matter at all. Let's just say Ohio State wins. All right.
They're basically even at this point.
Okay. All right. Let's just say Ohio State wins. When Oregon plays at Michigan in a month, that is a game that every Tennessee, Missouri, Ole Miss, help me here, LSU, Texas A&M, yeah. Like you have to bird dog that game. Like
I just think it starts earlier. I think it starts earlier. The way NFL fans now watch a Baltimore-Cincinnati game in the regular season.
Because they're worried about the wild card.
Just to pick one last week, this weekend that was a big-time game. You are watching for not only for entertainment purposes, you're watching to learn about these teams, especially in college football where SEC folks aren't like conference overlap doesn't happen as much as I would like it to be, probably as much as you would like it to see. Like people aren't watching Iowa State, even though they should. People aren't watching Indiana, even though they should. And I disagree.
That'll change because their schedules, like they've had really tepid schedules.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is why you have to watch. I think you're too late if you're not enjoying Ohio State, Oregon as a Missouri fan. Mm-hmm. You're already too late because to your point, what are you rooting for? You probably want Ohio State to go undefeated and Oregon to lose twice to give you a chance.
Okay, here's a truly insane thing that I'm about to say. If you are a fan of Missouri, Ole Miss, LSU, South Carolina,
Tennessee,
A&M, Tennessee, right? Yeah. You need to watch next Saturday. This is not a joke. Michigan and Illinois. Those are two ranked teams. I'm not kidding.
Get out of here,
dude. No, look, listen to me. Those are two ranked teams, and like Illinois is going to stop Purdue this week, and it's going to set up an It's going to be one fewer team in the at-large pack that you're fighting with.
USC, Penn State this weekend.
Yes,
critical game.
What a weird game that's going to be too.
Yeah, it will be. So the point is
I don't trust Penn State.
I think what we were going for with expansion was X, Y, and Z, which is, include more teams in the playoff more often, give teams like Missouri and Ole Miss that aren't quote unquote blue bloods, but can build to a great season or two to give them more opportunities to get into the playoff. Yeah. And then I think in a perfect world, we would all want a legitimate group of 5 team that could contend in a game, hypothetically. More often than not, that 12 seed is going to get roasted by a 5 seed. But in theory, you would, in a wish list situation, you want that team to be good enough to compete. Cincinnati was good enough to compete a couple of years ago getting into the playoff. I think Boise State this year has already proven that they're capable of giving anybody a run if they match up in that 5-12 matchup. But what happened on Saturday, in particular in the SEC, only sort of highlighted all of those things, where Alabama comes back to the pack, Tennessee comes back to the pack, and Ole Miss has already lost a game that we didn't expect any of these teams to lose. Nobody had the L circled on these teams. We had an L circled for Ole Miss or LSU in the game this weekend. We had games circled.
Yeah. And Missouri's the only exception there. But I will say, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Alabama, those were not the games they were going to lose.
Right. In which case we are living through what the expansionist, of which I was one, we're preaching all these years, which is to let's keep as many teams interested and involved in as many games as possible for as long as possible to make it a national sport. And I realize we're an SEC product and we're talking SEC football, but if you don't enjoy watching Oregon and Ohio State and you're a college football fan, I got nothing for you. I have nothing to sell you.
But we can go a step past that because you are, you do have to pay attention to a select group of the Big 12. I don't know what their at-large case is right now because I think, honestly, the field's too full. I think maybe starting next week, you can start to look at future schedules and say, like, all right, here are the 20 1-2 loss teams you need to keep an eye on for X amount of slots. it's still a little crowded right now. It's just the issue in the Big 12 is you have about 6 teams that could all end up winning the conference.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, SMU BYU from 3 weeks ago is going to end up impacting every single team that we just talked about.
Right. All right. So then let's kind of go quickly here, game by game, and we can start with Alabama and Vanderbilt. And I know you were there, so I want to get your journey through all of this. I reached out to some folks. I think the issue here from the Vanderbilt side is like Clark Lee. A lot of folks are crediting the strength and conditioning hire that he made in January and February for a lot of this progress that they've made all off season. I heard them talking about it. I went out to practice multiple times. All of this was credited to them. That of course showed up against Virginia Tech in week 1. It showed up even more so against Missouri, and then in full force against Alabama, where there was nothing fluky about it. It wasn't bad referees. It wasn't the stadium. It was none of that stuff. They lined up and controlled the ball and won at the point of attack. We'll get to the Alabama side of this. Diego Pavia, Jerry Kill, Tim Beck, all brought in by Clark Lee from New Mexico State. Pavia, we told you after week 1, this is going to be a guy you need to watch and pay attention to. He grew up idolizing Manziel. He plays like Manziel. He is a breath of fresh air for Vanderbilt fans who have not had a player of his caliber at that position, maybe ever. Is it surprising, even after all of that this is where Vanderbilt is? Absolutely. I think what matters the most, in talking to some boosters and talking to some folks inside the program over the last couple of days, they need this to be a snowball effect for the program. They started this with Candace Story-Lee investing in the program about 12 to 18 months ago. Clark has made some really good quality coaching decisions and sort of CEO-ish decisions around the program to sort of put it in a better position. This has to have a ripple effect that is not just a couple of more wins on the schedule to get to a bowl. This needs to turn on the spigot. There needs to be proof of concept buy-in from the powers that be. And I know a few boosters that are ready to do it. I know a few boosters that are ready to go with this. And so I'm just curious what it can actually lead to, more than just an incredibly memorable night and some really, really maybe a couple more wins, maybe a bowl game. There needs to be a longer tail to what they're doing.
Yeah, no, they need to pivot off of this. This can't just be the weird aberrant thing that happened, and we all kind of like, oh wow, Louisiana Monroe beat a first year, Nick Saban at Alabama. It can't be a foot. Alabama wants it to be a footnote like that, but if you are any of the people that you just mentioned in a leadership position at Vanderbilt, this is the program that our first episode of this season, I think I said something to the effect of, I just wish they would take themselves seriously. I was probably meaner than that. It was just like, I'm so sick of the fact that they forget they have an SEC football team. That wasn't so much that's not a barb at Clark Lee at all, who I've known.
No, it's a barb at the other folks running
it's
athletic
all of the other people in the apparatus around them. So it's funny that you led off talking about strength and conditioning, because my notes are somewhere around here. I had to do hand notes real fast. It was like 5 references between, I sat in on his post game and then I went to his office with him. 5 times he mentioned strength and conditioning.
See, I'm telling you. All right. So
can
you
go ahead.
You agree with my question and my point, right? Which is that this has to have a snowball effect. And I think it already is, because if you look at marketing and what they're doing this week already, they're breaking up the goalposts and selling it at an auction. They're selling the pylons at auction to pay for the fines and the fees. They're raising money for all kinds of stuff. The marketing team is all over the videos. Social team hasn't slept for 3 straight nights.
No, and they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't. All of this has to be like capitalized.
Dude, they were on Saturday Night Live. Yes, they were on Saturday Night Live.
Nate Bargatze's throwing up the anchor down at the end of the.
How freaking cool is that?
It's great. It's great. So I want to hear your story, because it sounds like you kind of agree with how I just laid this out, what it needs to mean for Vanderbilt. Yeah. But I want you to kind of, as I know you're not a short storyteller, but work through what your Saturday night was.
I did Sirius this morning, and I could hear myself blowing through the segment. Like, I think the host said I was on the ACC radio thing this morning, on ACC network or whatever, and just blew through the segment. I could just hear myself monologuing.
Yeah, sure.
You radio people.
Well, that's why we're here. People. That's why we're here in this form, where we don't have to. You don't have to fit it into your 2-minute and 38-second hit song.
As anyone could guess, I did not look at the calendar and say, I'm going to go to the press box for this game. Okay. I hosted a morning it's called the Hurry Up on Split Zone Duo, but it's basically like we try and condense every single 133 teams into usually about 35 to 40 minutes. It is hard to do.
Yeah.
We crush through it.
More like 45.
Yeah, usually. Well, if I'm on there, good 65.
Okay.
The point is, like, you give Jacksonville State as much attention as you give Michigan State or whatever. I did that for 2 weeks in a row. I was off the rotation. I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. Like, I have kids. This Saturday. Like, I'm going to keep an eye on all these things. Sunday, I think you would agree with me, is when, like, a lot of sports media, we do a lot of our work in college football on Sunday because you're experiencing it. We're all experiencing it. Then you, like, make the phone calls, look up the weird stuff. So I'm, like, putting together a new grill in my backyard. I have the TV on the quad box. One of my children inexplicably wants to keep the audio on the Georgia game. I don't know. He's like a Georgia fan now. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, the whole time I'm like working on this, like putting together this giant smoker, I'm like looking over and I'm like, I'm like, oh, like Bama, Bama, they're going to catch up. Like, I don't know what your experience was. The entire time that score was creeping along, you're like, all right, well, they'll close. They didn't close. And my wife was outside and she's like, the post is going to hit you up. And I was like, yeah. So I stop what I'm doing. I'm like covered in, I've been like doing outdoor chores and stuff. I'm all gross. And I text my editor at the Post and I was like, hey, are you seeing this? He goes, hey, yeah. Are you seeing this? I was like, he's like, don't you live nearby? And without doxing myself, I was like, I do. Yes. I can hear the horn that they blow, from my backyard. And he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, if they don't score, I was like, if Bama doesn't score in this drive, I don't think this is going to happen for Bama. And then they confab. This is how big breaking news works. The Washington Post is like, well, we don't care if Alabama wins. Like, that's supposed to happen, right?
Right.
But if the number one team in the country gets upset by Vanderbilt, we need you there.
And you live a couple miles away.
I went from covered in like outdoor crap, and I had just been like working on my truck, so dad, to standing on the 50-yard line in 21 minutes. There was a shower involved, throwing on dress clothes, getting my gear together, all this stuff. Shout out to Vanderbilt, by the way, who helped me because I texted the main crew of SIDs, and they were like, we'll have an assistant waiting for you. Those of you who live in Nashville, there's like a gate by the Wendy's on West End. I've never done this before. I wish I had my camera going the entire time. Get out, like, wife drops me off on the curb, and I'm going. I just walk because someone waves, and I walk straight through every single level of security onto the field as it's like there's about a minute and 20 seconds left in the game. So, and then basically over. And I started from the Alabama side because you certainly want to capture that reaction. And I've never felt an adrenaline rush quite like that because I have been around, dude. I was an in-person, like a national college football reporter in a different press box through pretty much all my 30s. And I've seen a lot of upsets, and I've seen national championships, and I've seen Super Bowls and blah, 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 blah. That was a different feeling on both sides than I have ever felt before. And then when they started the clip of Nick Saban on the Pat McAfee show on like a dubstep loop, I don't know if the TV cameras picked up on that, but after they cut the national broadcast and went away to the studio, someone at Vanderbilt just started rolling it of him saying that, every place is tough to play in the SEC, but Vanderbilt. And he just says it over and over again. And people got crazier and crazier and crazier.
I'm not sure if Vanderbilt fans realize that Nick Saban is no longer the coach at Alabama, but it didn't matter. It did not matter in that moment. It was
a very, very intense moment. And then I was in Clark's office about, I don't know, they do the press, the main press event thing. He gets really emotional, which I was thinking, I was like, have I ever seen a Southeastern Conference or Big Ten coach like in this moment? He let the moment happen in him. And by the way, I'm not being critical at all. I think it was good to show human emotion. You think about, and he said this, that program was dead this offseason, dead, completely dead. And to do what they did is that's not proof of concept, dude. That's Haley's Comet. And so I asked him, and I was just like, what does it feel like? I mean, like every single thing you've ever either thought or believed or told us you believed or hoped just happened. And he really kind of tried to downplay that because, to your credit on the question, Braden, his goal is not like, hey, we were the team that won that time.
Yep.
And I don't want to take anything away from an upset because college football, that's like in the DNA. It's the backbone of like you tune in because something insane is going to happen with 18 to 23-year-olds, right? But you cannot make a living off adrenaline. You cannot survive on moments like that. So by the way, they got to beat Kentucky. And they said that pretty soon after. Like I talked to Pavia and he's like, we got to go beat Kentucky.
I talked to somebody very high up at the program who immediately was like, we've got to be like I was like, did you take the walk down to the river? And he was like, no, but we've got to beat Kentucky.
Yeah, because they have to bowl. Like they have to bowl now.
Right.
Could you imagine beating Alabama and not bowling? Braden, they gave up. I know total yards is a junk stat in so many ways, and I can give you 10 different EPA comparisons.
Yep.
But they allowed fewer yards from Alabama than they did from Georgia State.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that people are already saying. We should be 5-0. We should have beaten Missouri.
We
should have beaten Missouri, and we should not have lost to Georgia State. I think 4-1 is fair. So let me go to the other side of this with Alabama. And I really thought I've thought this since the second the game ended, which was, and we were actually down in a suburb, sort of at a friend's house, sort of a gathering for the next game that was going to happen. That's going to make even Vanderbilt fans even happier. Which we'll get to Tennessee and Arkansas in a second. But what's interesting to me is the thing that this is the first moment in which no Nick Saban has impacted the program, because what matters, what Nick Saban was so brilliant at for all those years, was to remove the human element, the 18 to 22-year-old element from his football team on a week in, week out basis over time. Yeah. It is to say whatever happened last weekend is irrelevant. You compete with yourself every single day, every single practice, every single rep, every single drive. Mm-hmm. And it is natural and I thought Georgia exhibited some of this against Auburn, where they clearly were sleepwalking in that first half, which again, I think is related to the heavyweight fight that happened the week before. And your job as a coach for Alabama is not to out-scheme Clark Lee. Certainly you need to put something in place to stop Diego Pavia, but that wasn't the job this week. The job was to remove the human element of the Georgia game from their performance all week long and into the Vanderbilt situation. And I was having a tough time sort of finding an example of all of this. And then I saw highlights of an Alabama player losing his mind. And I said, there it is. That's the thing that you're looking for if you're trying to point to what Nick Saban brings to a program. It is so much stuff, but at its purest form, it is about consistency, no matter what is happening around you. And we saw a player for Alabama, it was Malachi Moore, I think, right? Who was clearly not able to manage the emotion of the situation. And it's not fair to put it all on him, but it is representative of what Nick Saban normally removes from the team. Got up for this big game against Georgia, had this massive lead, gave up the big comeback, figured out a way to win. Emotion, physicality. Got to bring it the next week against Vanderbilt. And they did not. They didn't. They got beat. They straight up got beat. And that's, to me, that's a Nick Saban value point right there.
No, it's the Nick Saban value point.
Okay, good.
That's it. It's like I used to say, it was like a play on that whole Woody Guthrie thing, like this machine kills uncertainty. I am, as a football coach, everyone's like, oh, he won so many games, he beat these. No, that's not, the statue's not there for that. The statue is there because he did the one thing that 100 years of college football journalism said was impossible. And coaches said were impossible. And everyone said was impossible. Was that you cannot eliminate the emotional heft and swing and peak and valley of what college athletics creates. And he said, watch me. Or as the youth would say, bet. And that's what he did.
Heard.
And he did that for the better part of 20 years. And this is why it's kind of, again, I've said this before on the show. When you deal with the Washington Post, it's a highly educated, very large readership, but they're not college football smart, if you know what I mean. Like they don't have these kind of nuance. And I said, look, what you just saw, you could talk about the Vanderbilt part of it, and it's awesome. And hey, they're throwing the goalpost in the river, and the Predators coach helped them, and that was like amazing.
Nashville Predators defenseman Dante Fabro had his car dented by the.
Oh, is it his car?
Yes.
So for those of you who are not,
the little yellow, he walked out. A little yellow paint the next morning was all over his car.
Okay, well, so this was in the Tennessee and in Nashville. Yeah. Predators head coach Andrew Brunette was walking out of the arena and helped them lift it off a car. And he I took it a couple blocks. It was fun. And he kept saying yeah, some car got damaged. That was one of his players.
I don't know if that car specifically is the one. Okay. But I do know that Dante Fabro, again, defenseman for the Predators. Carry on. If you are seriously, think about how many car insurance companies sponsor college football. Is that not the most amazing claims call that you've ever had? Yep. Where you're I was parked on the street. I was legally parked. I paid the meter.
and a goalpost from a mile and a half away. 50 drunks were carrying it. Like, I mean, yeah.
2,000 Vanderbilt fans walked by with a goalpost, and they're like, "What?"
Yes,
that didn't happen.
No, to the point about Saban, it has absolutely. Look, I'm very happy. This is one of the greatest sports moments in the city that we live in. So I want to acknowledge that and tip the hat. The story here is that an era ended, an entire era, and not only just one program's era. But think about, Braden, how many other dynasties were built to either replicate or answer the Nick Saban machine?
So I hear what you're saying. I do think, much like we cannot say automatically that this win is proof of concept for Clark Lee long term, I don't think we can say that this loss is proof of concept that Kalen DeBoer isn't capable. He has this is a moment where he has to learn as the coach what made Nick Saban great. I think he knows. And then he has to come back and show there's still a chance that Alabama runs the rest of the table and wins every game the rest of the way. Like, that's
Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. He's not Nick Saban.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I will say this, much like you jumped off the couch to head, or jumped off the porch to head to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
If I had not been like an hour away from the state, like, I was ready to head to Lower Broad, which I do not like going to as a Nashvilleian. I was ready to head down there and park at Nissan Stadium across the river and just videotape what happened across the river. And I was an hour away, unfortunately, which leads us to our next topic, which was, I was at a group of Tennessee people watching the Tennessee party. You can imagine that went over well. It went over great with the Vanderbilt fans. Easily the best night in Vanderbilt sports history for people in Nashville. Here's my question. I struggled with this after the game. Arkansas, credit where credit is due. Gutty performance by the backup quarterback. Sam Pittman is, I think, underrated. The two coordinators he's got. I think hiring Travis Williams last year and Bobby Petrino this year, I think that team on offense and defense is now very sound schematically, more so than anyone wants to give them credit for. They're still kind of a one-person show, and they sort of lived off the energy of the crowd and Taylon Green's injury there at the end of the game. Here's my question. More offense or more defense for Tennessee? What was the problem? Because I know a lot of folks are saying offense. A lot of folks are saying Nico didn't make plays. They had three guys. They had three guys injured at the receiver position. I don't like the play calling to go away from the running game. But honestly, Arkansas went up and down the field most of the game. Tennessee was bend but don't break the entire time. They got some fourth down stops and they held them to field goals, but by and large, Arkansas kind of went up and down the field. And so I struggle with who do I put on whose fault is this? Nico, the play calling, the offense, maybe some injuries to receiver. Is it? I mean, certainly the last play where he doesn't throw the football into the freaking end zone is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. But honestly, I kind of started in my head with the defense, and I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that. Where are you on Tennessee?
I think it has to be both. I don't think that you can necessarily sell one out without describing what you just did, which is that there were deficiencies in both areas. I think that this may, yeah, I mean, but also, again, emotional swings. This is what happens. We always say, like, well, offense feeds off our defense. They usually, like, people will say that in a positive way, like, it works the other direction too. This may be the best single game plan I've seen in a long time from Arkansas. A long time. And
I like the coordinators. I like them.
It reminds me, I think Travis Williams kind of made his career on Saturday night. If you don't know, I think one day he might be the head coach, maybe on the
Auburn,
maybe on the Plains. All right, getting back to the matter at hand.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting this year that we have seen a repetition of seemingly invulnerable quality national title teams either having a tell or not being able to respond to a tell going into a game. So this was how Alabama ran the score up so dramatically on Georgia, was because they showed looks on both sides of the ball that the other side had not dealt with at all and was not able to adjust to. The same thing really happened with Kentucky's defense and Ole Miss. And now we see it happen, I think, really, I would say a little bit more, just because it was, I'll put it this way. Again, I was at Vanderbilt. I was sitting in the coach's office. I was trying to get a story done for the Post that I didn't know I was going to write. And I look at my phone, my scoring app, and I was like, oh, it's frozen because it says 3-0. Dude, this is not a joke. I was like, oh man, because like cell coverage will get bad in crowds. Yeah. I was like, oh, the damn thing's frozen. Wasn't.
Just the game, just the entire football game.
Yeah, not the most watchable thing.
Third quarter was fun.
I would say that it's a little bit more of a Arkansas defensive triumph if we're trying to build a narrative.
Probably. Yeah. I'll say this. I also think that much like Clark Lee deserves a lot of credit for what they did, Mike Elko deserves a lot of credit for what A&M did. I do think that performance
hang on, we called that one.
What?
Take a lap. We have been saying this since just A&M since week 0.
Oh yeah.
Like guys, we said it and everyone laughed. He duked again. Verb.
Well, what's interesting to me is I thought, and I guess I don't think Pittman is a verb yet, but I do think that there's very few games where you see it play out and you're like, that's a more accurate embodiment of the coach's personality than the way Arkansas won that game in the fourth quarter, which is, I mean, they were sound offensively from the first drive where they were picking up chunk yards. They were sound defensively for most of the game where Nico was largely not capable of, outside of the one extraordinary play on the final drive where he goes full like Patrick Mahomes and completes like a 35 or 40-yard pass. Otherwise, he missed open receivers. They did a great job. They did not stop the run, and I thought Tennessee should have leaned on that a little bit more. But to put the backup quarterback in who had not clearly picked up any first downs at any point to then go down the field, and it was just to me it felt very Sam Pittman-ish to go through this kind of game and win this kind of game like that for him. And I don't know if we need to have a larger takeaway about Tennessee other than they're just not quite as good holistically as we think. That still might be good enough to play in the playoff. It still might be good enough to win some games in the playoff. But Nico has not, why did they beat NC State? Not because of Nico. Why did they beat Oklahoma? Not because of Nico. Why? The Nico has not been the driving force of their success so far. And what I think is interesting is the Oklahoma game, we perceived the game plan as a complement to the program's maturity and growth. Same exact game plan in this situation, and it's viewed in a negative way. And I think that's okay, actually.
I don't want to give a lot of credence to what I'm about to bring up, but it's sort of very, very popular this week is, well, what if this is the NFLification? What if we're turning into the NFL? And what I mean by that is that in the NFL, Super Bowl winning teams will have
5 losses.
Well, sometimes, but they'll have losses where they look really bad. And what we find out later, 5 and 6 and 7 weeks later, at the end of the playoffs, was it was something they hadn't seen, they needed to adjust to, and they become better for the loss. This is kind of how I couched the Georgia narrative leaving Alabama, which is why I think I was more positive about Georgia. Still am about. I was right about that. I was more positive about Georgia leaving the Alabama game.
Title of the episode: We were right.
If yes, we were.
Texas A&M, Diego Pavia, Georgia's offense.
Totally knew Vanderbilt win that game. If we're carrying that through in the NFLification, whatever, Tennessee will be better for this as well because
agree.
There's nothing that. Well, let me back up.
Unless they're not very good on offense,
there should be nothing that beats you twice that happened on Saturday.
I agree.
And everyone's like, "Oh, it's a blood week," which is like this internet community term for like when there's a lot of upsets and whatever. But it was kind of a good feeling for the losers by the end of the night. I tell you who felt great about it: Ole Miss and LSU, who didn't have losses, because now it's like, oh well, we're all kind of in spit and distance. So it's like if you're Tennessee and you feel really terrible about what happened against Arkansas, I get that, but also like Bama just lost, Georgia has a loss. Okay. Line them up and let's do it again next week.
I did think about this all last week heading into the Saturday, and then Saturday sort of like confirmed what a premonition, but not in the way that I expected. I didn't know nobody had Vanderbilt winning that game. No. But frankly, Miami should have lost. So it should have been 6 top 11 teams losing to unranked teams. So to your point about the NFLification of this, I think what's interesting is I would love to talk to a coach off the record about tension and how tension was used to force focus, because there was no room for error, and you had to preach that to kids through every previous iteration of college football. And I am curious with 18, we just said the beauty of the coach that Nick Saban is the greatest of all time is his ability to remove the human element from humans, especially emotional young humans who are 18 to 22. And if you're telling me that that's the number one skill of a coach, is to take the human element away from humans, then how could you not tell thousands of college football players you can lose twice? and have it not affect how they play. And I'm not saying every Saturday. I'm not saying even in big games. I'm saying if the job of the coach is to keep you at a certain level, isn't the job harder when every player knows the conversation around the sport is you can lose twice and still get in? I don't know how you. It is, if you take 5% off, you lose a bowl game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you have to. People always use this moniker in bowl games where they say, "Oh, that team didn't want to win." I don't think it's the team. I don't think it's that teams don't want to win. It's that if you play a good team on the other side of the field, also on scholarship and clearly now on payroll, you play just 10% less good or less focused, you'll get beat. It's not about not caring, not want. Oh, Georgia, Auburn didn't want to win against UCF. They didn't show up. That's not what it is. It's that they were 10% less focused. Maybe they were out the night before. Maybe something else was going on. That's all it takes. And if it's like, here's the other thing about Nico. Now I'm kind of stream of consciousness here. I need to shut up so you can explore the studio space. I think Nico needs to. He's almost too chill. He's too cool.
Yeah, I could see that.
It benefits him very well in a financial way. It benefits him very well from NIL. He is not a guy who loves doing all the NIL stuff. He's not a guy who loves signing autographs and like being a face of the franchise, but he knows how to do it, and he knows he has to do it in a very NFL kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw moments on that field where it felt like he was unengaged at certain times, where he's just standing on the sideline, like staring into space, waiting for his turn. And that's a little premature on evaluating him, but I think they tie together. Like, you don't have to be perfect every play of every game to still make the playoff. And I think it's in people's. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think it's in kids' heads.
Well, we'll see with the undefeateds, because I'm leaning towards they're not like we're gonna have a 12-team playoff field and no one will be undefeated unless they let like Liberty in or something, like the 12 seed wonky G5 situation. But I think we know that 5 through 11 won't be undefeated. So really what I'm asking is, will the SEC champion be undefeated? And I don't think he will be. They will be. So. Miami or Clemson will. I think Miami has tried to lose 2 games. Okay. So that's where we're at with them. Clemson has lost.
They got saved by the ACC office.
Clemson has lost. And I do not think that the Big 12 champion, I don't think I'm on a stretch here either. Like, the Big 12 champion's not going to be undefeated. So who does that leave us? I just named 3.
Ohio State and Texas.
Really, actually, it's Ohio State. Can Ohio State run the table? Otherwise, I'm not sure that any program will go through this undefeated. By the way, if you're a Texas fan, like, I'm not.
It's okay.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying it.
Right.
Look around. I know it hasn't happened yet, so everyone thinks like, oh, you don't believe. I was like, look, I tell you what. Put a pin in it. Let's talk after next week. I keep saying that over and over again, but like, Red River is built for just chaos.
And a great defensive line from Oklahoma with a quarterback who can run around. I'm not picking Oklahoma here, but I have seen really bad 5-7 Texas teams beat really good Oklahoma teams, and vice versa. It can happen. And I also think it's as good for those in the SEC that don't know about this game. I mean, I learned how to cuss at a Texas-Oklahoma game when I was 12 years old. I learned, I learned words that my father was like, "Don't listen to those folks." It's fine if you want to say that Florida-Georgia is the best rivalry in football, or that Iron Bowl is the best rivalry in football. Like, pick your favorite rivalry. I love LSU A&M as a point of fact. Magnolia Bowl is,
that's like I have a personal thing there, but I would say that Texas OU in terms, I'll say this visually. I stood in the end zone one year and looked around.
It's amazing.
It's a decrepit facility, but one of the things that old facilities did was they forced everyone to be really tight together. Woo! It's like a soccer riot, man.
If you want to say the Egg Bowl is the greatest rivalry in college football, like, I'm not going to argue with you, because I think everybody's own rivalry is the most important thing in their lives.
If you say that, I won't argue with you, but I don't want to live next door to you.
No, I don't. But Texas Oklahoma is as good. It may not be better than any of that stuff, but it's as good. It is as good as any of these that we have in the SEC. So I think it fits in perfectly. And to your point, I don't think it's a knock on Texas to say they're not going to be undefeated at the end of the year. I guaranteed A&M's victory over Texas.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah,
I still feel really good about it, Stephen. Feel really good about it.
I think you know what? We'll just check in on that before we get there. But like, right, are you feeling this good from a like A&M offensive standpoint?
It's the best. So we're kind of bouncing around here, but like, we can get to Ole Miss bouncing back and A&M making progress on offense with Connor Wigman as the starter. And then also, what does it mean for Missouri? Like, there's a lot to get to here with those 3 teams. as I said, if A&M's going to ruin a lot of seasons, and if you ruin enough seasons, you become the season, and they are very close. They're not far. They're not far off from being the team that's having the season.
And because they missed some of these teams too. It's not like obviously you're ending with Texas. I'm not trying to make light of that, but it's I'll scramble and pull it up in a second. But like
no, they got
it's manageable.
They got LSU at home on October 26th. They're on bye this week. They got Mississippi State. Okay, on the road, not scared there. They're at South Carolina November 2nd. That could be tricky because their offensive line and their quarterback.
Okay.
New Mexico State at home, at Auburn. That's it. They don't play a team that's playing good football right now.
Other
than I guess you could say LSU and Texas. Those are good ones.
In the interest of sort of catching all these games that we need to talk about at once, you have an elimination game in Baton Rouge, I think. Okay. You also have something that we haven't seen yet in conference play, which is two programs that have been shown their weaknesses, costing them a loss. Okay.
Which is Alabama and Tennessee.
No, it's about Ole Miss and LSU. Their losses.
Oh, okay. You're sticking with that. Sorry.
Yeah. I think this is an elimination game. I don't think the loser of this game has any playoff hope after this point. Okay. Because Ole Miss would still have Georgia. LSU would still have A&M, as we just said, as well as Bama, I think.
Yep, at home.
This is an elimination game. So the thing that we haven't seen yet in the SEC is when you take it in the teeth, you can respond and bounce back. Every one of these programs we've talked about has done that. I fully anticipate, for instance, Alabama beating South Carolina this weekend, whatever.
God, how dare you?
What is the state of your team in 2024 will be determined for one of for the losing team at Ole Miss LSU. In other words, you will have had a flaw that you could not overcome. Now, unless it's something drastically different. In other words, if quarterback play for LSU is the reason they lose that game, which I don't think is going to happen, then you would have two set of very different circumstances.
I follow you.
For Ole Miss, it's very easy to understand, which is one, offensive line protection, defensive line penetration, preventing large plays on defense. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. It's all the stuff they spent money on in NIL that kind of failed them against Kentucky. All right. By the way, again, I just want to kind of quietly point this out because I just checked in on this game in the third and fourth. They weren't lights out. Carolina, they played really well defensively. Carolina doesn't have a great offense.
They got a fake punt gift from Shane Beamer in the first quarter.
And they did big man trick plays like for 2 touchdowns. I'm just telling you, it's not like they're not that good. But I would also say that the LSU defense, it just seems impossible for them to make the title caliber progress they need to on defense in one season.
No, LSU's not there, but I never thought they were. I think Ole Miss could be there, and I think the key with what's interesting about Ole Miss is that you could play a game like that and still win, cover the spread by 2, and still not feel like you played your best football. That is generally a compliment to a team.
Well, they'll take anything they can get in Baton Rouge. Anything they can get.
You mean LSU would take anything they can get?
No. I'm saying like if Ole Miss, Ole Miss could just drag their dead body if they get a win, because they don't think they've won since
6-4, a la Mississippi State and Auburn. Just go win 6-4.
I'm trying to remember the last time they won in Baton Rouge.
Hang on a second. I think I mistaken a Iowa State Penn State game 6-4 for a Mississippi State Auburn game that was 3-2.
That was 3-2. Yeah,
I gave them too much credit.
Then you also have the scoreless Virginia Tech Wake game that went to overtime. So the last time in Baton Rouge that Ole Miss won was 2008. Is that correct?
No.
Wow. Yes.
I thought it would have been. I'm
looking at it right now. There's
it would have been further than that. The year after the Natty, huh? Okay. All right.
Oh, I was at that game. Yeah, that was the Houston Nut Wild, where he brings the Wild Hog in from Arkansas.
So to get to your point on
McCluster.
To get on your point on the man, talk about McCluster. I was there for the Ole Miss Tennessee game where McCluster ran for like 265 and 5 touchdowns. I was wearing an orange shirt in the Ole Miss student section since I was dating a woman I was dating a woman that is not my wife at the time. It was a fun game though. It was a fun trip to the Grove.
You don't have to tell that story.
Nope, I don't. She knows. She knows. Ole Miss LSU is interesting to me from a matchup standpoint. What are you whispering, Mike?
I can't believe it's been since 08. Yeah.
That's a long time. So I don't think LSU's got the pieces in places that Kentucky and South Carolina did to challenge, and South Carolina couldn't challenge. I do think Nussmeier will be by far the best test for the Ole Miss secondary and the Ole Miss defense. It's not even close. It's
not even close.
That is a really interesting part of this. And if they can handle him well, I don't mean like shut him down to your point, but if they handle him well, that will be that'll be a big Ole Miss. Just look at the standings. I thought they fell too far according to everybody's AP rankings or whatever you want to call it, where they fall all the way to like 16 or whatever number is. And now they're all the way back up into like 7 or 8 or 9 because so many teams lost. And it's like, they should have just fallen to 8 or 9 in the first place because that's where they should be ranked.
That's why I don't. It's AP. It's idiots like us. Like, yeah, don't worry about that.
It's why I don't have Georgia or Bama falling that far after their losses. Like this, that you need to lose a second time for me to start changing dramatic opinions about who you are because we live in a different era now, and it's just different.
Sellers was sacked 6 times. Are they going to do that to Nussmeier?
I don't think so. He'll get the ball out faster, but it doesn't mean that's not the reason they can win the game. Pressure could be the reason they win the game.
If they can establish pressure on Nussmeier, I think they do win the game. I'm still highly critical because South Carolina is talented, but still very dubious overall in terms of like Kentucky laid down a nice blueprint, and I don't necessarily think that win at South Carolina negates what Kentucky did. I do think that I consider the USC game in week 1 scratch. Like it was close enough to where it's like, all right, that's a kind of a coin flip scenario. And also you're going to get better from week 1 to week 2, that trope, which is true.
Yep.
They've solved some of their inconsistencies. I mean, they also lost Perkins. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to be a really close game. It's going to be very similar to that was last year, the Jaden Daniels shootout game. It was 55-49 last year. I think
that's right.
I don't know if you're going to see 55-49, but I think you're going to see something in the neighborhood of 42-38, like something like that. Yeah.
So I'll take Ole Miss on the road because I think they proved a lot last week with how they played. It doesn't mean it's the end all be all, but I think they proved a lot. They can finish the deal, proving that they are still capable and belonging with a win this week. You got to stop Nussmeier. It's going to be interesting. We'll talk Texas and Oklahoma next week on the show. Tennessee, Florida. Tennessee's only a 15.5-point favorite. Tennessee fans are absolutely miserable about this football game.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. They have not really. I mean, this is the key. Like, they have not won in the swamp, I don't believe, since I was in college, which is 2004. Is the last time 2003 is the last time they won in the swamp. This game is in Neyland. They have won 2 of those games since that moment, but neither of them were. I don't think they have not handled their business, quote unquote, against Florida. Now they had 2 years ago. They had, I think it was like a 38-21 lead in the fourth quarter. Then they gave up a bunch of points to Florida and made it look a lot closer than it really was. Made everybody sweat in Neyland Stadium. It was like 38-33. They need to click on all cylinders sort of game here, where they put Billy Napier out of his misery. The defense does what it's supposed to do, and Nico comes off of 2 tougher games and plays better football because they are so much better than Florida in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
this has to be a get right game for Tennessee because if it's not, the demons will start to creep into people's therapy sessions real bad.
If it's Florida that does this and it's 2 in a row,
it's bad.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because there's some symmetry here that we're discussing where it's like, Ole Miss and Tennessee for the better part of the last 20, 30 years are not in this advantageous position. And they have these historic rivals that, have kind of turned them into cuckolds going into Baton Rouge. If this game was in the swamp, it would be even worse.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
My God. Tennessee fans would just be beside themselves this week.
Last year in the swamp, Florida lined up and beat their ass on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
That is unacceptable for Tennessee the way they're currently constructed and the way Florida is currently constructed.
Everything you just said, I'll take Tennessee. I'll take Tennessee to win. I'll take Tennessee to win by 10, 14 points, whatever. But I will say this. I agree with everything you just said. That Arkansas product is within the ability of Billy Napier. Yeah. That's Billy Napier saw that and he's like, oh, that's my style right there. That's what's scary.
Mississippi State, 33-point underdog to Georgia. Mississippi State has the feeling of being a team that's going to be really bad all season, irrelevant for most of the season, and we're going to spend a lot of time in the offseason trying to figure out what they're going to be next year. We'll see. That's bad. Sorry, Mississippi State. Sorry, Jeff Levy. Missouri's a 27.5-point favorite over UMass. They've got to win that game. But ultimately, what do you make of Missouri? Are they just a 9-3 football team?
Yeah.
And that's okay
somebody has to be.
They had a historically good season last year. Most teams do not replicate that year over year.
No.
Just in general, no matter what level of football you're on. I think it was bad how it played out. I thought there were a couple of bad calls, not that changed the outcome, but Brady Cook got like hammered one time in a late hit and didn't even get a call. So,
yeah,
but A&M is, I don't think that was fluky for A&M. I think it was a little fluky for Missouri, but I don't know what their upside is. I don't think they're a playoff team. So,
well,
I didn't have them in the playoff before the season. So
here's the thing about Missouri. We're talking about, they're a 9-3 team. Look, you got to lose the games to be a 9-3 team, and they're going to be obviously fine this week. They have Auburn. So, I mean, you're basically asking like Alabama and Oklahoma to do that work. I have not dismissed them outright totally yet. Okay, they have Oklahoma at home. So, and they close with South Carolina State and Arkansas. So it's like
Oklahoma looks like the better team, and that's crazy to say about Oklahoma.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're asking me which of the playoff caliber SEC teams is going to end up in that 9-3, 8-4 spot where they're playing a decent pre-Christmas bowl game, and like are super downtrodden, it's probably Missouri. Yes.
The three teams that
Ole Miss right behind them, though.
The three teams that I quote unquote didn't like of the top teams were LSU, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Those are the three I didn't love. I had Tennessee making the playoff. I had Ole Miss kind of getting into the playoff. I had A&M sort of sneaking around the outside. And so far, we were right. The name of the show, we were right.
At this point, I don't think Ole Miss makes the playoff because I have pretty sizable doubts about their ability to win this weekend, and I don't think they're going to beat Georgia. So 3 losses, you're not going to make it.
I agree. I think that the SEC, for as much as all the other leagues want to rail on the SEC and the 8-game schedule, it's still harder week in, week out than almost any other conference over the course of an entire season. And there's just too many good teams with too many good quarterbacks, too many good coaches for them to all survive. They're not all going to survive and get into the playoff.
Right.
Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Kentucky. Like, we can keep going. It's not just an SEC thing. It's a college football thing. It's what makes the sport great, but it's also why there's going to be some teams that are disappointed. And maybe it's just 3 that are good enough to get in. I don't know. I still think Tennessee is good enough to get in, though. So
I think you'll see 4.
Is it Alabama? Because I think it's Bama still.
I mean, if we're doing it after this week, yeah, probably.
I don't know.
I just think down the stretch they're going to put 4 teams in.
I know. I agree with you. I think it's Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. I think those are and I think I'd have Ole Miss and Tennessee battling for that last spot. Otherwise, you're running out of teams unless you're going to go A&M. Unless you're going A&M.
I think A&M has to get in that conversation.
I mean, I don't disagree.
What if A&M? Here's how you do it. A&M, your second loss is a close one against a Texas team that wins the conference. So I just gave you your marching orders. Say it one more time. Your second loss is a close one against a rival Texas team. So it's like Thanksgiving weekend, which is tough because historically, selection committee or BCS, you don't want to lose late. That's always been the sort of rule of thumb.
I think that's Texas's only loss.
Well, aside from Braden, but now I do have the Aggies beating LSU. See, there's something about the way Texas A&M is playing right now. I would love to see their defense against Nussmeier in that offense, like right now. That game's in like a month, I think.
I love that. I love the deep socioeconomic ties between LSU and Texas A&M. I think it's so good. I think it's so good. The I-10 rivalry goes way back further than you think. Each other. It's Katrina victims moving communities. It's so layered. It's so layered and so good. I love it. I love everything about that rivalry. It's very underrated, I think. All right. Otherwise, you got Texas, you got Tennessee, you got LSU winning.
I think so.
Vanderbilt goes on the road, beats Kentucky, 14-point dog.
I have no idea.
The magic continues.
No idea. Not touching that thing.
And Alabama dominates at home against South Carolina.
I would. Yeah, I'm still taking the Tide there.
The whiplash in college football in 2024 is strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's strong, but that's the beauty of the game.
If Bama loses, God help us all.
Or give me the clicks. we don't get clicks. We don't get clicks. We get downloads.
Clicks, yeah.
Give me the downloads. Give me the downloads. Right. Although your Washington Post story gets clicks though, so there you go.
I think so. Yeah, they want subs though. Give them the subscription.
That's true. They want subs. They want subs. All right. We also want subscriptions as well to the YouTube page and to the podcast app. So make sure you check all that out. So does Steven for SplitZoneDuo.com. Make sure you sign up for that. And what else are you working on these days?
Who Killed College Football at WKCFB on social media. You can also check us out, Who Killed College Football, WKCFB.com. Support us on Substack. Episode 2 about conferences is coming out this week.
It seems, not to put a whole damper on your entire thesis here, but it seems like college football is pretty much alive and well.
Ask Nick Saban. He said it.
Just saying.
Ask Nick Saban. He was the one. He's the one who killed it.
I don't agree with a boomer who doesn't want to pay players, or doesn't. I take it back. He wants to pay players. He doesn't want to deal with having to pay players. That's what he doesn't want to deal with. All right. Okay. All right. Be good. Everybody down in Florida, by the way, and in the mountains.
Stay safe.
North Carolina and Georgia. Stay safe, please. All of you folks. Be careful. We're thinking about all you guys. I know it's coming in this weekend as well. It's going to be nasty. I got family down there, so everybody stay safe in Florida and of course up into the mountains as they rebuild. So stay tuned to all that good stuff. Split Zone Duo at Braden Gall, at 38 Godfrey, all the great stuff from across the 440 Sports Network. Go to ML Rose, by the way, as well. ML Rose, great place to go grab a burger and have a beer and watch some college football on Saturday, especially the SEC. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you guys next week.